Well, let's just jump into some rapid fire. We've got 100 days to go until Notre Dame football opens the season in Dublin, Ireland against Navy. So, what gets you the most excited when you're thinking about this new season for the Fighting Irish with 100 days to go?
So what's got me the most amped up and excited right now would be this kind of revamped, renewed, re-innovated offense that the Irish have pieced together over the offseason. We've talked about it a lot. The addition of an offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, new offensive line coach, in combination with a young wide receiver room, a grad transfer quarterback, a really good running back room. So yeah, just seeing how all of that comes together and hoping that they can be a high octane offense and compete with, the USCs, the Clemsons, the Ohio States. I think that's what's got me most excited for the season. And then second, what kind of goes along with that is, to me, this is a Marcus Freeman kind of led team. He's kind of flushed out a lot of the coaches and players that he was, kind of, I guess, grandfathered into when he took over the program.
He inherited, yeah.
Yeah, he inherited. So to me, it just feels like truly we are embarking on the Marcus Freeman era. And I'm really anxious to see, what that Marcus Freeman era looks like, because to me last year, like, did I want Notre Dame to do well? Sure. But I was content with it being Marcus Freeman's first year, it not being, an entire staff and roster built by him. But I think Marcus Freeman is really going to be defined over this year, and then ultimately the years 2, 3, and 4, I think, are going to be Marcus Freeman's biggest years. So this first year going into a more Marcus Freeman-esque era is another thing that I'm really excited for.
Good point, because I mean, he does tend to get kind of a free pass for things that happened last year, for the most part, anyway. I don't think that there is near probably the same level of scrutiny on him compared to, say, Brian Kelly in his first couple of years. But
Yeah, but I do think that there will be added pressure next year. I think there will be more people upset and alarmed if you
right,
have games like
yeah,
Marshall and Stanford
the
again.
free pass only goes so far. Yeah, and I'll address kind of some of that coming up here in a second. But I'll just piggyback on yours, because that's like, it is the offense that I'm excited to see, this new offense in action. I mean, having the best passing quarterback Notre Dame has had in at least like the last 15 years since Clausen. Just thinking about how those Sam Hartman, Jaden Thomas, and Jaden Greathouse connections were in less than a half in a cold, rainy spring game. That's kind of got me percolating, and the anticipation for what more can come, because he didn't have Chris Tyree and Tobias Merriweather to throw to in that game, and like, you combine them with those two receivers right there alone, and you mix in the running game like you're talking about, a running game that Hartman never had out there at Wake Forest. It's just been so frustrating over, for so many years, to see all these other offenses around college football be able to thrive and just go about the way they do things so differently than the way Notre Dame has operated offensively for so long. Like, I want to see Notre Dame be an actual, like an innovative, and it doesn't even have to be truly innovative, just a functional downfield type offense. And I think that we can see that this year with a guy like Hartman being the trigger man. I mean, he's like the Game Boy, like we were talking the EA Sports college football yesterday. He's gay. He can be the Game Boy for this whole thing. Like, it maybe some video game like stuff, some actual fun offense to finally get to see. So I'm really excited for that. We've got 100 days. We shall see. So the flip side of that, is there a biggest concern that you have at the 100-day mark of the season?
The biggest concern I have, that's a tough one, because I feel pretty solid. Like, looking at it offensively, I feel like the running back room is in good hands. I feel like the offensive line is in good hands. I guess the thing that I'm most worried about, most concerned about, and again, looking at the defense, I don't have a lot of concerns, because I feel like they're getting better at linebacker. They're a solid secondary. They've made improvements and added depth along the defensive line. So to me, the biggest concern is, can the wide receivers step up and do what they're supposed to? You
Are
know,
they really going to? Are they really going to be what we think they can be?
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that is my biggest concern because there's so much inexperience. There's not guys out there who are proven, catch guys, yard guys, touchdown guys. There's just so much inexperience with Tobias Merriweather, Chris Tyree, obviously playing running back his whole career, the trio of young wide receivers. Like, there's just no one that is like, this is going to be the guy, right? There's no proven actual wide receivers. And then I think another one is a concern that came to light last year is just depth at the quarterback position. Knock on wood, you never want anything bad to happen, but if Sam Hartman goes down, that would be very tragic for this team. It's like you don't even want to say it
Yes,
out
it
loud
would.
almost.
Yes, it would. Yeah, and that's Joe. Joe agrees with you, and I hadn't really thought about that. But I mean, that's probably, like even Ohio State would be in that situation. We just got done talking about Ohio State. I think there's a lot of teams that would be in that situation. You're most likely going to have to go to an unproven guy if something happens to your number one guy. It's up to your coaches to get those guys ready to go. But there would be a drop off if you go from Sam Hartman down to Steve Angeli or even Kenny Menchie because of the huge gap in experience. And like I think that's a legit concern. Most of my on-field concerns, like the biggest one that I had was what was going to happen at safety. I think they've addressed that, getting Antonio Carter last week. My thing, not a concern as much. It's not a concern. It is just, I guess it's a bigger picture question of, are the blips of losing to the teams that you're supposed to beat, is that a thing of the past? Like Brian Kelly had Navy, Tulsa, South Florida in his first couple of years before he turned the corner. And then 2017 to 2021, things got smoothed out. They beat the teams. They beat all the teams they were supposed to beat. Didn't always beat the teams that were sort of ranked evenly with them or maybe a little bit ahead of them. But it's can you continue to, or can, for Marcus Freeman specifically, can he put like the Marshall Stanford type stuff behind? And like Michael is saying, Notre Dame fans need to end everything about losing those kind of games to Marshall and Stanford last year, exaggerating expectations that Marcus Freeman is going to lose to bad teams. Yet Brian Kelly has as well. And he's still just a second year head coach. So that's, again, not as much a concern, but it is a question. Are those blips going to be a thing of the past? And going back to what we were talking about, to like most excited, Joe was talking about the culture change, and I think that goes along the lines of what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to
being
hint at.
Marcus Freeman's team right now. Yeah,
what he's building, not what he's building with or building off of, what Marcus Freeman is building from the ground up on his own, how he wants this program to look, how it is going to run in the future, etc., etc. I think that is the most exciting thing, because I think Marcus Freeman can really turn Notre Dame into that program that we've seen in the past, that we got accustomed to, in the 80s, 90s, etc. I think he can bring that back. And not to say that Notre Dame wasn't there. I just don't think that they were in that top tier of teams, the last 2 decades or so. So, I really think Marcus Freeman has a tremendous opportunity on his hands. And I think that is the most exciting part to see. Obviously, I want it to go well, but we can only wait and see if, how it's going to go.
Irish Gordian Knot says, would you rather bet on Sam Hartman to get 4,000 yards, Tobias Merriweather getting 750 yards, or Merriweather getting 1,000 yards? I don't know. Was this a lucky lefty conversation? I think I missed the first part of this. He said Malik kept moving the goalpost, if that's what they were talking about today. Which of those would you be most willing to bet on?
Tobias at 750.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd hedge toward. I realize 4,000 yards is a lot, but I would hedge toward Hartman getting the 4,000, because with the receiving group that they've got, and again, like you were just talking about, as inexperienced as it is, that's as We're Not Marshall says. The kid has one career catch, and now you're expecting 1,000 yards, and you said 750. I don't know if it's going to be him. Is it going to be Jaden Thomas? I would think one of those guys is going to get that. I would be more in the boat
4,000 is
of
about, if you're assuming 13 games for a bowl game, fourth at least, right? Because maybe they make the
Mhm.
playoffs and get to 14 games, but 4,000 yards and a minimum of 13 games comes out to about 300 yards per game. That's not
Right.
unattainable.
No, and that's why I would bet on the 4,000 because I mean, think about what their schedule looks like with throw out Ohio State and USC and Clemson and just push those games aside and you've got 9 games remaining where like you would expect that they should be able to get the backups in quite a bit with the kind of offense that we think that they're going to have and with the kind of defense that I think that they're capable of playing. So and again, the ability to lean on the rushing game doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to like that it's going to take away from his passing yards because look at Caleb Williams last year. We used him as an example before. He was up there over that mark and USC still had a solid running game and it wasn't even a great running game. So I think with the kind of backs and offensive line that Notre Dame has, you can have both that you can have a quarterback who should easily, especially when he's got the experience that Hartman has, he can easily be up there around 4,000 yards. I think that the ball is going to be spread around a bit. I would definitely not push it toward 1,000 yards for any of the receivers, but I definitely think that you can have probably 3 guys who are at least 650 and above this season in terms of wide receivers.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a good point there. Something that's going to help Sam Hartman's game is the run game, but like you said, it's not going to take away from his passing attempts. It's just only going. I think it's going to make his passing easier because they're going to have to respect the run game and commit some guys to the box here and there. And I think that linebackers having to honor a run game and at least take a step and look at it. I mean, that just gives Hartman a little bit more time and the ability to kind of probably get more man on man coverage, considering more guys have to be committed to the box to the run game. So I think both of those things it's Jason Garrett hit it on the head
Are you
a
going to give
lot when
Jason Garrett some credit?
he hit it on the head a lot when he did Notre Dame games. That run game is what opens up their pass game ultimately, and that's
Yeah.
what's going to get everything kind of churning. Is the run game allows you start off with a run game, physical run game. It opens up your pass game. I think you become more pass dominant towards the middle part of the game, and then as you're coming down off it's like a parabola loop. You get to the run game up here, you ride out that pass game, and then you kind of come back down with the run game to end the game. And that's kind of how I see their plan of attack going majority of the season.
Parabola loop as you motion up in an arc. You are literally talking above my head with the parabola loop. But I think I agree with the gist of what you're saying. And Michael says if Drew Pine wasn't the quarterback last year, the receivers they had would have performed last year. And it's bingo. And that's why with a legit quarterback, all these guys can perform. And Gideon Nutt said Garrett did not hit it on the head during a lot of Notre Dame
I thought
games.
he did well in Notre Dame games,
I
actually.
I I I
think
feel like his X's and O's were pretty good. I don't want to hear about game strategy from Jason Garrett. His X's and O's were solid. Was it the most entertaining
yeah,
broadcast?
knowledge of the
Probably
game
not.
was there, but like the
Right,
entertainment aspect of it was not there at times.
right, right. Exactly.
No, I
So
actually hated him as a Cowboys fan. It's the complete opposite.
yeah, please don't even go there, Gordian. Not. It is not because no, 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 no. And I mean, this is closer to true. He's a robot. Yeah, I mean that I wouldn't. He's
Robots know their stuff, though.
that's right. Robots again, like XO, like strategy gets more to emotion, right? Game situations where X and O.
Schemes.
Yeah, he's actually a good offensive mind, but we'll push the Garrett talk aside. Let's talk more Sam Hartman and other quarterbacks because we talked yesterday about that ridiculous ESPN quarterback tier article that has Hartman in tier 4 with more than 20 quarterbacks ranked ahead of him in their ranking. My question is, which quarterbacks would you actually want instead of Hartman right now if you had your choice? And I'm talking about quarterbacks who will be playing in the FBS this season. Which quarterbacks would you actually want instead of Hartman? For me, it comes down to one guy. I don't know about you.
There's two guys I would take over Sam Hartman. One would be Caleb Williams. Two would be Drake May. And then you start looking at some of the other names. Michael Penix Jr. I wouldn't want him. He's also a fifth-year senior, so it's not like you're getting any younger. I would take Sam Hartman's experience and the ability to throw the ball over that. I think that playing in the ACC is a little bit tougher than playing in the Pac-12. Again, Bo Nix, I wouldn't take over him, another fifth-year senior, older guy. I think that Sam Hartman has the better experience. Then you start looking at some other names like Jordan Travis. I'm not in on his hype. He hasn't proven anything really to me. And then you look at Cam Rising as well, another older guy, another quarterback out in the Pac-12. It's crazy. You look at a lot of these lists, and there's like 4 quarterbacks from the Pac-12 all in the top list. And I'm not buying any of them except Caleb Williams. And again, I just think Pac-12 defenses aren't as battle-tested and as hard as some of these defenses over in the ACC. And I'll take Sam Hartman's experience in the ACC over the Pac-12 experienced quarterbacks. Yeah. So the only reason I go with Caleb Williams and Drake May is because they're younger. And they won't even probably stick out their all 4 years in college. So even then, it's not really that big of a deal. So those are my two guys at the end of the day.
I mean, they're both supposed to go at the top of the draft next year, and a lot of people saying they would have taken them this year if they were draft eligible. It would only be Caleb Williams for me. I mean, you can call it a push with Drake May. I wouldn't take him over Hartman. They had a head-to-head game last year. North Carolina won by 2 points, and you can argue that maybe they should have won by more, just based on, like, if you look at recruiting rankings alone, North Carolina has outpaced Wake Forest. Pretty much all these other schools and quarterbacks that you've talked about, whether it's Penix or Nix or Travis, like all the places they've been at, the recruiting rankings for pure offensive talent have been ahead of what Wake Forest has had. Like look at Josh Downs at North Carolina. He was a 3rd-round pick last year. Hartman's best receiver that he had last year had over 1,000 yards. He didn't go until the 6th round. So, like, like if you boil it down to numbers, they're all fairly similar. Some are ahead of Sam Hartman, but when you look at what he has done with less at Wake Forest, I Caleb Williams would be the only one I would definitively say I would take ahead of Sam Hartman. Again, there's some that would be pushes, but like look at like he's going to have a running game to lean on for the first time, kind of like Cam Rising out at Utah. Like if you look at what Rising has done, like he's maybe one of the few, again, like Rising and Nix or Penix when he was at Indiana. Penix at Washington is another story. But again, like when you look at what they've had around them, Rising hasn't had necessarily anymore, but they've had a better offensive line, better offensive system, better running game, and that's what Hartman's going to have now. So that's why Williams would be the only one that I would put ahead of him. Even with Drake May, because like look at Sam Howell. Like Sam Howell played in the same system, and he was supposed to be so great. What's he done? So I wouldn't take him above Hartman. So the ACC appears to be nearing a new agreement on revenue distribution that would give a larger share of postseason revenue, including from the soon-to-expand college football playoff, to the teams that play in the postseason games, rather than dividing all the revenue equally among conference members, which they do now. Do you buy or sell this idea for the ACC to try to kind of appease the masses out there that have been uprising?
Yeah, I believe in distributing the revenue across the teams equally. And I'll tell you why, because, not every team is going to be great. Like this decade, sure, Clemson might dominate and North Carolina State might be bad. But who's to say the decade after this that North Carolina State isn't the team that, kind of takes that next step up and Clemson takes a step back? So it's easy to say in the moment as a school that, yes, we want all the money that we're generating, but you're looking at it in just this kind of smaller window. So for me, I think it could hurt you in the long term. And I think it's just better as a conference to be kind of unified. So I would be on the same boat of distributing the revenue equally. I don't know about you.
So you want them to keep the even revenue split like they have right now?
Yeah, I do. And I think it also fluctuates because, obviously football is your big sport and obviously the biggest moneymaker. But, just because Clemson's good at football doesn't mean they're good at baseball, basketball. Like there's so many sports across the whole entire college. I think it's so easy to get hyper fixated on one sport in the moment now rather than considering, long term
Well,
down the road in the bigger picture of all the sports kind of
and
equally.
it would be a revenue split of not just football, but it would be like, men's and women's basketball. If your team goes to the tournament, there's extra revenue that comes along with it there. And that's why I like it, because the original idea was like Clemson, Florida State, and these other schools went in, kind of into these meetings saying we're the ones who are producing the most, right? And the other 5 schools along with them, like North Carolina, NC State, etc. They're like, we think that we're more deserving of a better split right now, and you should give us more and forget everybody else. I think it's kind of a compromise and a good one to say, if you go to the playoff, if you go to March Madness, if you go to the College World Series, whatever it happens to be, then yeah, you can have more revenue as a
Yeah,
result
I
that
like that
year.
kind of idea is, regular season is like a base and that kind of gets redistributed evenly, but the incentives
Right.
of making it past the regular season, I do think that that particular, sport and team should reap the benefits of it because they went above
Right.
and beyond. It's out of kind of like that base or
It's
core
like,
of the regular season.
yeah, it's like, if
Like
if
contract incentives basically that
yeah,
professional athletes get.
if you're a salesman, you're going to make more. The more you sell, the more you're going to make, right? And it's really the same thing. It's exactly what you said. It is incentive. So like the base TV revenue would be the same, but if Clemson goes to the college football playoff and none of the other ACC teams do, then Clemson gets the college football playoff revenue. It's not going to be split with the rest of the conference. Again, like same with March Madness and whatever else. And it's obviously on a year-to-year basis. So kind of, like the baseline stays the same with the basic TV revenue, but you're essentially getting postseason bonuses if your teams make it to the games that count. So I like it. I think it's the best compromise that the ACC is probably going to be able to come up with right now. All right, so SI's Ross Dellenger reported this week that if the Big 12 can't get the Pac-12 teams it's been pursuing to join the conference, UConn is next on the Big 12's wish list. Do you buy or sell UConn potentially to the Big 12?
I don't. I sell UConn going to the Big 12. And the reason why I sell them is literally outside of basketball. It's the only, like, basketball is the only fit it makes in the Big 12. And I think it'd be a great addition there. But I mean, if you're looking at football, baseball, all the other kind of sports that come along with it, UConn can't contend. Like, UConn football almost got shut down, if I'm right, not too long ago. And so I just don't think that they could handle their own outside of basketball inside the Big 12. I think that is literally the only reason why that there's even interest because of the recent national championship. And then obviously, the women's success over however long it's been, that Gino's been there. So
Yeah.
I just sell it because basketball is the only selling point. And that's like like November to March. So like 4 or 5 months out of the season. I just, it's not enough for me.
I said this a couple years ago. Like UConn just needs to move. Football needs to move back to FCS. Like they gave it a shot in the American Conference. All it got them was 11 straight losing seasons and an upside down athletic department budget that's put them tens of millions of dollars in debt. They have tried, not even big time football. Again, it's the American. There's some solid football in the American, but it's, like they move back to the Big East. As you said, like they just showed that they could win a men's national championship. Women's basketball is obviously still successful there. And it's like, it is Stores is an outpost in Connecticut. It is literally like you've got to drive from Stores, probably close to an hour to get to the airport in Hartford, and just all this other, like, to get from there, like, to Lubbock, Texas, or even Waco, or any of these places, Lawrence, Kansas State. Like, why would you be considering that? Stay in the Big East, be a basketball school.
Yeah,
If you
just
want to,
dominate in the Big East as
yeah,
the big fish in the smaller pond. I just think going to the Big 12, they would drown. They would drown outside of women's and men's basketball. And I don't think
yeah,
that those two programs could keep them afloat
yeah.
as a school as whole,
For
essentially.
basketball, for basketball only, it would be a great move to the Big 12. But to try to compete in football, I just don't see it. I see it driving them backwards once again and costing them more money ultimately than what they would be able to get out of it. I just don't see it. So the NFL's director of broadcasting, Mike North, was on the SI Media podcast this week, and he told the host Jimmy Traina when Traina asked him why the Aaron Rodgers-less Green Bay Packers are going to have 5 primetime games this season. North said it's in part due to the Packers having a track record of turning inexperienced quarterbacks into winners. What do you think of that?
So I understand the argument and I understand the logic because I mean, we're talking about the most blessed quarterback franchise in the last 3 decades with Brett
Yes.
Favre and Aaron Rodgers. And I know, Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers probably weren't the most coveted. Like you didn't look at both of those guys and say, yes, Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champions, all the accolades that they ended up compiling over their time. I just don't see Jordan Love following that lineage. And I don't know if that's too skeptical of me, too early on of me, but I just don't see it as something that's going to happen. I think the only thing that really keeps them in there is that it's the Packers. They're one of those kind of legacy teams.
Right.
And I just believe that there is still enough national fans, whether or not they have a good quarterback or not, a proven quarterback or not, they're still going to draw interest. And so while I understand the logic to a degree, I just think that in the end, Jordan Love isn't going to follow in the footsteps as Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. So I think it's a little bit of a stretch to say that that is your main reason for putting them in those prime spots.
Well, and it wasn't necessarily the main reason, but it was one of the reasons that he had. And again, he's saying they've got a track record of doing this. I mean, it's a track record of one because, like you said, it's like Brett Favre was traded from Atlanta to Green Bay. That was like that's a distant memory. Like what, at least 4 head coaches ago at this point. And to go from, him turning into what he turned into. I remember in college is when that trade happened from Atlanta to Green Bay. And it's like, who, one of my roommates and best friends at the time, huge Green Bay Packers fan, and he was skeptical of that. He was skeptical of the Aaron Rodgers deal, but there's only been one transition from Favre to Rodgers. And yeah, that worked out well. But again, like that was a different administration. That was a different coaching staff ago. Like if it were me, again, just like you said, I would have, because the Packers are there because they're the Packers and they do have a national following, but they've also been blessed with 3 decades, 31 years of Rodgers and Favre. Maybe Love does turn into that. Like he's got all of, I think, 50 pass attempts in his career right now. There's nothing to show that he is. I think I would have front loaded that primetime schedule with maybe, 3 games early on. But if they get to the middle of the season and the Packers and Jordan Love are floundering, who's going to tune in to that? They're just going to be stinkers. So I think it was an interesting rationale, to say the least, to say that's part of the reason that they're going with Green Bay 5 primetime games this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's either going to go really well or kind of be the Packers' public display of not being good after being, pretty good the last 3 decades.
Yeah, that's right. And we've got some discussion going on, like Chi-Town saying Favre and Rodgers are not the normal in the 70s and 80s for the Packers. Was I mean there was a lot of bad quarterback play after Bart Starr. That's exactly right. And Roger Dodger says Montana young for the Niners, but that was messy. It was, and that is like those are really the only two handoffs that where you went from one Hall of Famer to another. Like there have not been. It's pretty much the fact that the Green Bay Packers got 30 years of Hall of Fame quarterback play is just astounding. No one has ever done that before. Like the closest thing is Tom Brady in New England, and he did that all himself. Like when you're talking about that, length of time of Hall of Fame quarterback play, but there's never been a handoff like that before. It's lasted that long.
Give me your way too early NFC North standings.
Oh man, see, there's just.
I'll give you mine. I'll give you a little second.
Do you,
I got
I don't know
Lions,
if I don't know.
Vikings, Packers, Bears.
That would probably be the direction that I would go because I just don't know what that Bears defense is going to be like, and like Justin Fields, like so many times last year, like he really didn't throw that much. I think he threw the least of any team or, like any quarterback in terms of attempts. Even when they were trailing as much as they trailed, he didn't
I
throw the
think there were
football.
games where he barely threw it 10 times.
Yeah,
Like 15 was his maximum, very maximum sometimes.
right. They didn't even air it out when they were trailing. He would still be running the football. So I just don't know if I can buy completely into the Lions hype or not.
Yeah, but the Lions handled the Vikings last year,
It's
even
true.
towards the end when the Vikings were hot and the whatever they were, the Lions, they beat them, and that's why I think that I like the Lions' momentum going into next season. I don't
Yeah.
think the Vikings can sustain that record they did last year, and I mean they kind of proved it in the first round of the playoffs, right?
Yeah. I would probably go Lions, Vikings.
Packers and Bears are going to
Those
be like
other
one
two,
game difference, in my opinion. I think they're both
right.
going to kind of be there.
They'll probably split with each other and both will be sub 500. There's a reason the Bears got the number one overall pick. I'm not expecting them to make a move this year, beyond just Lovie Smith handing it
Yeah,
to
the
them.
number one pick isn't going to, fix that entire roster.
Right. So it's going to be Deion and Colorado against TCU in Fox's first big noon kickoff game of the season, September 2nd. Scale of 1 to 10. How much does it move the needle for you?
Oof. It's like a 2 for me. 10 being the highest, like the needle going, the speedometer going, maxing out. I got to go a 2 out of 10. And the only reason it's a 2 is because I could give a crap about TCU. I want to see what
Everyone wants to see what Colorado's going to do.
Yeah, I want to see what Deion puts on the field. And if they're a competent football team, really, that's all I'm looking for.
John puts it at a 1. I put it at least at a 5. Again, like just because of the Deion stuff. Can they, after all these transfers and all this, waves that he made coming in the door, can they be competitive? I'm not sold that TCU, by the way, is going to continue to be anywhere nearly as good as they were last
there's
year.
no way. I think they're actually going to be like a sub 500 team this year.
Ooh, you think they'll fall that far back? Well, then
I think they'll be like 7-5.
If you think that, it could be competitive then.
No, that game's going to be competitive. I don't think that game's not going to be a blowout, in my opinion. I think that actually Colorado will have more athleticism on the field than TCU, but I just don't know what they're going to look like as a team game one.
Yeah. Chi-Town says Colorado's going to get blown out. I'd like to see what the line is right now. We'll see if I can find it here in a second because
I don't know where you find all these lines at.
What? They're in your app. All you got to do is go to your app. They're in there. You just got to look for the futures. So Colorado currently has a Vegas over-under win total of 3.5. Falcons win total is 8.5. The Bears, the Chicago Bears, are 7.5. So which of those three teams' win total is more likely to go over this season?
Shoot. So we're talking, AFC South. Tampa's going to be gross. Panthers are going to be rebuilding. And then what's the last team in that AFC South? The Saints.
Saints, yeah.
Saints are nothing, crazy.
But what are the Falcons?
That's what I mean. You look at the over 8.5. That means you're a 9-8 team at minimum. I don't really buy that from the Falcons. You go look at the Bears. The Bears, that's like an 8-9 team. I think they could finish right around there. I think they could be 8-9, 7-10, somewhere around there. Deion at over 3.5. That means you're going 4-8. Just because of the parity in college football, I think I feel most confident about Deion going over 3.5 wins. I just think that the guy, what I know, he's a lot, and I know, but he's got a track record, and I know it's not in the Power Five, but he's upgrading his roster as he's moving along, and he's never shown to me that he's going to be a guy that doesn't exceed expectations. He's always exceeded expectations in everything that he's done, whether he comes off as arrogant, he comes off as cocky, loudmouth, whatever you want to say about Deion, is he exceeds your expectations. The guy was a professional two-sport athlete. He just did everything that he basically was told he couldn't do. And so I have the most faith in the Colorado Buffs to go over 3.5 wins, because I think Deion's a winner and he'll do what it takes to get that program turned around.
First of all, the Atlanta Falcons are not winning 9 games.
That was a stretch. I mean, Desmond Ridder and Bijan Robinson are leading the backfield. So that's a sophomore and a freshman, coming in.
And that's my point. Like, okay, you can add Bijan Robinson, and the fact that was their pick, considering all the holes they have. They don't have a quarterback. I don't care how bad that division is. They're not winning 9 games this season. Maybe they get to 8. Maybe. I think that's
You're telling me sports gambling Calvin Ridley isn't going to move the needle for you either?
No. The Bears are not winning 8 games. Sorry, Chi-Town. The Bears are not winning 8 games this season.
That's what I mean. So by de facto, I have the most faith in Colorado and what Deion is, and the fact that it's still college football. Like, there's so much parity. Things can happen.
Yeah. The South is a trash division, but hate to do this to you. The North is not going to be that much better. They do have the Lions and the Vikings, and it's like, if that's the step up, then oh my goodness. But
Kenny Moore found your lines for you, 23.5 on DraftKings.
I was just getting ready to say that. I was waiting for you to finish. Colorado is a 23.5 point underdog to TCU.
I might take that right now.
Yeah.
Lock me in for a future.
I think that I would take that as well. I do like the over 4 wins, though, for Colorado this season. I mean, or 3.5. It might only be 4. It might only be 5. But it's still the Pac-12, and the roster is going to be completely different than what Colorado had last year. So you can't base it on the 1-win team that they had last year. He's completely overhauled the roster. So
he'll get him right in fall camp. It'll be a tough fall camp for Colorado, but I think he'll get him right.
All right. K-Mac's heading out, and we're getting ready to wrap up as well. So appreciate you joining us here today. We had a lot to cover, a lot of good stuff that we had on today's show.
I know what I'm doing immediately after this show. I'm taking them to cover 23.5, and I'm taking the over in the 3.5. I might parlay those if it's possible.
I was going to say, I would jump on that right now. I think that line has got to come down before it gets there. You get
we are not Marshall. I'm sorry you live in Atlanta. I was down there a month ago, and that is the worst traffic and airport I think I've ever experienced in my life.
Yes, very large airport, that's for sure. All right, well, smash the like button on your way out. We appreciate you being here as always. I think, Vince, you're here tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I'm here tomorrow.
All right, I think Vince is with us as well. So either way, we will talk to you then. Hit the like button, subscribe, rate, and review, and talk to you tomorrow. Thanks to Chase Brown, IB Nation Sports Talk.